They laughed first, always do. Called you delusional, said your dreams were too loud for someone like you. But tonight, the joke flipped, one sentence, one public moment. And suddenly the world heard your name wrapped in potential. Elon didn't raise his voice. He raised the temperature. Now the same people who mocked you are sweating in silence, sick with jealousy, choking on the realization that you were never crazy. You were early. And early scares people more than failure ever could. They laughed because the future doesn't wear name tags. It doesn't announce itself politely. It doesn't knock on the door asking for permission. It walks in wearing uncertainty, and people panic. They laugh because what you carried inside you didn't match their tiny expectations. To them, the future is supposed to look familiar, sound safe, behave according to rules written by people who never dared to imagine more. And you didn't fit the script. You were asking questions they were too scared to ask. You were thinking 10 steps ahead while they were still congratulating themselves for standing still. So they laughed, not because you were wrong, but because they were threatened by a timeline where they no longer mattered. You see, people laugh when they don't understand something, but they laugh harder when they do understand, and it terrifies them. The future you represented wasn't loud at first. It was quiet, subtle, dangerous in the way a loaded weapon is dangerous when everyone else thinks it's empty. You were experimenting while they were repeating. You were building while they were copying. And nothing scares a crowd more than someone who doesn't need their approval to move forward. Laughter becomes a defense mechanism, a cheap shield against the fear of being left behind. They told themselves stories to sleep better at night. That you were unrealistic. That you'd fail eventually. That everyone who dreams big crashes hard. Those stories weren't about you. They were about protecting their fragile comfort. Because if you succeeded, it meant their excuses would die. And excuses are precious to people who've made peace with mediocrity. So they laughed, clapped each other on the back, reassured one another that the future belongs to people like us, not someone like you who refuses to stay in line. But here's the part they never admit out loud. While they were laughing, they were watching. Closely. Every move. Every small win. Every quiet improvement. Laughter doesn't mean ignorance. Sometimes it means obsession. They couldn't look away because deep down they sensed it. The future was bending toward you. Slowly. Invisibly. Like gravity. And gravity doesn't ask for permission either. It just pulls. You didn't wake up special one day. You became dangerous through consistency, through patience, through surviving doubt without becoming bitter, and that confused them even more. They expected you to break, to shrink, to ask for validation, but instead you stayed calm, focused, silent. Silence is unsettling to people who rely on noise to feel important. Your silence told them you were listening to something else. Something they couldn't hear yet. They laughed because they couldn't measure you with their outdated tools. They judged by popularity. You moved by purpose. They count applause. You counted progress. They chase attention. You chased alignment. And when someone plays a completely different game, the audience gets nervous. They don't know when to clap, when to boo, or when to run. So they laugh, hoping humor will turn uncertainty into something manageable. But time has a cruel sense of humor. The same laughter that once echoed around you slowly turns hollow, forced, defensive. Because the future has a way of arriving without warning. One moment you're crazy. The next moment, you're visionary. Not because you changed, but because reality finally caught up. And when that happens, laughter doesn't disappear. It mutates. It becomes jealousy, denial, revisionist history, where they claim they always believed in you. They laughed because they thought the future was far away. They didn't realize it was already standing right in front of them, wearing your face, waiting patiently, watching them laugh while the clock kept moving, while doors quietly unlocked, while paths rearranged themselves, while what scared them most slowly became inevitable. One public moment is all it takes to snap the illusion. Years of silence, years of grinding in the shadows, years of being underestimated, all compressed into a single second where the spotlight accidentally swings your way. Funny thing about the spotlight, it doesn't create anything new, it just reveals what was already there. They swear it happened overnight, like magic, like luck tripped over you by mistake. But you know better. That moment was just the receipt, proof of a long transaction. Nobody bothered to watch while it was happening. Public exposure is terrifying because it removes the mask people wear to stay comfortable. The second your potential is seen, really seen, the room shifts. Conversations change tone, smiles tighten, compliments come with conditions. The air gets heavier because everyone suddenly realizes you were never invisible. You were just being ignored on purpose. And ignorance is a choice people make when truth threatens their hierarchy. One moment doesn't elevate you. It exposes the lie they told themselves about you. They replay it in their heads like a glitch in the system. That moment shouldn't have happened. You weren't supposed to be acknowledged. Not yet. Maybe not ever. You were meant to stay in the background, useful but quiet, talented but contained. And when the world publicly recognizes what they privately dismissed, it feels like betrayal to them. Not by you, but by reality itself. Reality broke the rules they were counting on. What they don't see is how lonely that moment really is. Public recognition doesn't come with a crowd of allies. It comes with a sudden absence of honesty. People start approaching you with agendas instead of curiosity. They study you like a puzzle, not a person. They want to know how to benefit, how to attach themselves, how to rewrite their past interactions to look supportive. And you feel it instantly, the shift from being doubted to being dissected. Potential is uncomfortable when it becomes undeniable. Before, they could laugh it off. After, they have to explain it. And explanations require accountability. They have to confront the fact that they misjudged you, overlooked you, maybe even tried to suppress you. That's why the reaction is so intense. Envy isn't loud at first, it's polite. It hides behind praise. It pretends to be happy for you, while secretly mourning the version of reality, where you never made it this far. That single moment doesn't change your path. It changes their position on it. Suddenly, you're not behind them anymore. You're ahead, or worse, unpredictable. And unpredictability terrifies people who rely on control to feel safe. They start measuring you, ranking you, whispering comparisons, not because you asked for it, but because your existence now disrupts their mental order of how things are supposed to work. You realize something important when potential goes public. The silence you endured was easier than the noise that follows. Doubt was heavy, but expectation is heavier. Everyone has an opinion now. Everyone has advice. Everyone suddenly sees themselves as part of your story. And you're standing there, still the same person, still carrying the same vision, but now surrounded by eyes that weren't there when the work was ugly and uncertain. That moment was never about validation. It was a signal, a crack in the wall, a reminder that the world eventually notices what refuses to disappear. Not because it's loud, but because it's persistent. And once that signal goes out, there's no pulling it back. You can't unring a bell. You can't make people forget what they've seen. Potential, once exposed, becomes a problem for everyone who bet against it. Jealousy never kicks the door down. It slips in quietly, wearing a smile, pretending to clap while its hands are shaking. Hate is honest. At least it tells you where it stands. Jealousy pretends to stand beside you while secretly measuring how far ahead you've gone. When they couldn't stop you, when laughter stopped working, when dismissal failed, jealousy became the new language. Softer words, sharper intent, compliments that feel cold, questions that dig a little too deep, interest that arrives far too late. Jealousy is born the moment someone realizes your progress, exposes their stagnation. It's not about what you have, it's about what they didn't do. You become a mirror they didn't ask for, reflecting back every risk they avoided, every excuse they protected, every dream they negotiated down to something safe and forgettable. And mirrors make people uncomfortable, especially when they've spent years perfecting the art of not looking at themselves. They start watching you differently, not to learn, but to compare. Every move you make becomes a scoreboard in their head. Every success, a silent subtraction from their self-worth. They scroll, they listen, they analyze, pretending they're just curious. But curiosity doesn't come with bitterness attached. Jealousy does. It twists admiration into resentment and turns your growth into their personal insult. What's funny is how exhausting jealousy is. It requires constant attention. They have to keep track of you to keep feeding it. They have to remember what you achieved, where you're headed, who noticed you. Meanwhile, you're busy building, unaware that your existence alone is draining them. You're not fighting them. You're not even thinking about them. And that imbalance drives them insane. Because jealousy wants acknowledgement. It wants reaction. It wants proof that it matters. So it escalates, subtle sabotage, side comments, doubt wrapped in concern. Just being realistic, they say. Just looking out for you. But concern doesn't celebrate your failure in private. Concern doesn't feel relieved when you stumble. Jealousy does. It waits for cracks so it can say, "I knew it," not because it wants truth, but because it wants comfort in being right about your limitations. Jealousy also rewrites history. Suddenly, they remember times they helped you, moments they supported you. They exaggerate their role in your journey because your success feels incomplete without them attached to it. If they can't outshine you, they'll try to stand in your shadow and call it partnership. And if that doesn't work, they'll distance themselves and call it dignity. The dangerous part is how contagious jealousy can be. It spreads through whispers and raised eyebrows. It recruits other insecure minds, turning individual resentment into collective skepticism. They don't attack you directly. They plant doubt around you and hope it grows. Because jealousy is cowardly. It prefers damage without fingerprints. It wants outcomes without accountability. But here's the joke they never get. Jealousy is loud to the person carrying it, and invisible to the person it's aimed at. You feel pressure, yes, but not their pressure. You feel growth pressure, expansion pressure. The kind that comes from outgrowing rooms, not from shrinking to fit them. While they're busy tracking you, you're busy evolving beyond the version of you they learned how to envy. And the more you rise, the more their jealousy reveals itself, not in attacks but in exhaustion. They get tired of pretending, tired of smiling, tired of explaining why your success bothers them, because jealousy has no end goal. There's no finish line where it suddenly feels satisfied. Even if they catch up, it will just move the target again. You don't defeat jealousy by confronting it. You starve it by not feeding it, by staying focused, by staying unpredictable, by refusing to perform for anyone else's insecurity. And that's what really breaks them. Not your success, but your indifference. The realization that you never needed their approval, their validation, or their permission to become what they secretly wish they had the courage to pursue. Being early is a curse disguised as madness. When you arrive before the crowd, there's no applause, no roadmap, no reassurance that you're going the right way. There's just silence and suspicion. People don't panic when they see failure. They panic when they see something they can't categorize. And you were unclassifiable. Too sharp for the present, too restless for the rules, too focused on a future nobody else had the courage to imagine yet. So they labeled you unstable, unrealistic, excessive. Labels are easier than understanding. Slow minds need consensus to feel safe. They wait for permission from numbers, from trends, from authority. They move only when the crowd moves. So, when someone steps ahead without a parade behind them, it feels like a threat to the system. You weren't just early, you were alone. And loneliness scares people who depend on validation to breathe. They couldn't follow you, but they couldn't ignore you either. So they chose the next best option. They questioned your sanity. Madness is a convenient word. It allows people to dismiss what challenges them without engaging with it. If you're crazy, they don't have to listen. If you're unstable, they don't have to reflect. If you're delusional, they don't have to admit they might be wrong. So they laughed, whispered, shook their heads like they were watching a cautionary tale instead of a preview. And all the while, you kept moving quietly, relentlessly, without witnesses. The funny thing about being early is that nothing around you confirms it. Progress doesn't clap. Vision doesn't trend. You're running on belief, not feedback. Every step forward feels like a gamble because there's no proof yet, only intuition. And intuition looks like insanity to people who outsource their thinking. They need charts, approval, guarantees. You needed alignment. And that difference made you dangerous. They tried to slow you down with concern. Told you to be patient, realistic, practical. As if practicality ever changed the world. As if history was written by people who waited their turn. Their advice wasn't meant to help you succeed. It was meant to help them feel comfortable. Because your pace reminded them of their hesitation. Your urgency exposed their procrastination. And nothing angers a slow mind more than someone who refuses to crawl. Over time, something shifts. The ideas you spoke too early start appearing in other people's mouths. The paths you walked alone become crowded. The risks you took quietly turn into case studies. And suddenly, the same people who called you mad start saying you were ahead of your time. Ahead of your time is just a polite way of apologizing without admitting guilt. It's society's way of saving face after being wrong. But by then, you've already moved on. Early minds don't wait for recognition. They adapt and keep evolving. While others are catching up to your old ideas, you're already questioning your next ones. And that's the part they never understand. You were never chasing validation. You were chasing truth. You weren't trying to be seen. You were trying to build something that didn't exist yet. Being early means accepting isolation as part of the process. It means trusting yourself when there's no audience, no proof, no echo. It means understanding that clarity often comes wrapped in chaos. And when the world finally slows down enough to understand what you were doing, you're already too far ahead to care about the labels they used to keep you small. Madness was just the name they gave to something they couldn't control, something they couldn't follow, something that refused to wait for them to be ready.